Hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Larissa Christensen and I am co-leader of the Sexual Violence Research and Prevention Unit at the University of the Sunshine Coast. And so today I'm presenting on a paper I co-authored with my wonderful colleague Jodie Woods, who would have loved to have been here today. And so this paper was really focused on the growing and concerning issue of child sexual abuse, live streaming. And so it's, of course, a form of child sexual exploitation that, despite its proliferation, it is hugely under-researched. And so the aim of our paper was essentially to attempt to fill a bit of a gap in knowledge, at least for the time being, by providing a synthesis of the existing research. And so given the limited research available, we essentially wanted to take stock of at least what we do know. As you're probably aware, most of the research focuses on individuals who perpetrate child sexual abuse material offending, so that type of offending that occurs, say, on passive platforms such as websites. But the rise of CSA live streaming introduces additional challenges. So as technology improves, live streaming becomes even more accessible. The potential for this form of exploitation is growing rapidly, and so this makes this form of offending particularly troubling. So our synthesis, it aimed to cover a few key critical areas. We first of all wanted to look at where CSA live streaming occurs predominantly, geographically. We also wanted to explore the technological and legal barriers that hinder detection and prosecution. We also wanted to explore what we know about viewers, what we know about facilitators, and finally, what we know about the victims. So these are the points I'll be exploring with you today, along with some of the key considerations and recommendations in the field. And please know, we don't aim to answer all of the questions. We know this form of offending is so complex. It's multifaceted, and the research on live streaming is still very much in its infancy. However, we believe that our synthesis still serves an important role in offering that initial overview for any of you who are here, who are interested in understanding, preventing, or responding to this form of abuse. So first of all, what is CSA live streaming? It really stands apart from traditional child sexual abuse material due to its real-time nature. In live streaming, the abuse is broadcasted via webcams or any device that has a camera or internet, allowing perpetrators to direct and watch the abuse unfold in real time, regardless of the geographic location. So that creates a unique set of challenges for law enforcement. And the practice, it fits within the human trafficking framework. You've got recruiting children, which is the act, coercion or deception, which is the means, and sexual exploitation for profit, intent. Perpetrators, who are sometimes referred to as hands-off offenders, access live streams through facilitators, who are also sometimes referred to as operators. And the operators arrange details like the number of children who will be involved and what acts they might be performing. The payments via wire transfers or Bitcoin allow for some degree of anonymity. And in some cases, the live stream events are recorded and later distributed online, contributing to the global pool of child sexual abuse material and perpetuating that cycle of abuse and exploitation through that circulation of the material. So this combination of real-time abuse, organised facilitation, and the potential for widespread distribution of child sexual abuse material, it makes it a very, very dangerous and complex form of child trafficking and exploitation. And so it's been suggested that there is a substantial demand for live stream content. because viewers perceive it as more engaging than pre-recorded material. And what I mean by that is that live streaming can offer viewers an active role, enabling them to command children in real time to perform specific sexual acts that align directly with their fantasies, as though they were directly involved there in person, despite not being physically present. So consequently, this form of abuse may provide an even more exhilarating experience for these individuals that other forms of sexual exploitation may fail to offer. So it's also novel in that viewers can potentially watch new content that has never been uploaded to the internet ever before. And in terms of how common is it? I'm sorry, I can't provide an answer there. We don't know, unfortunately. We do not know. And one of the biggest challenges in addressing CSA live streaming is the lack of reliable, comprehensive data on its true prevalence, and the full extent of this crime remains largely unknown. However, what we do know suggests a troubling and high demand for sexual live stream content. And research has shown that there is a significant market for this form of abuse, with offenders actively seeking out these live streaming opportunities to exploit vulnerable children. Further complicating the picture is the global nature of this crime. So for instance, research has found that 18% of live stream child sexual exploitation cases in the Philippines were initiated by offenders based here in Australia. So that really highlights for you the transnational scope of CSA live streaming, where offenders from across the world can exploit children in countries where less robust legal frameworks or enforcement capabilities are. Let's now turn to where geographically CSA live streaming predominantly occurs. And so it's widely acknowledged that certain regions like the Philippines play a central role in the live streaming of CSA. But of course, we need to still adopt a critical lens. So while it appears that live streaming is most prominent in the Philippines, I must of course acknowledge that this potentially could have to do with better detection or reporting. But in saying that, we know that most live streaming cases occur in these poorer countries. But it's really important point to make that the live streaming of child sexual abuse can still occur in developed countries, okay? So it's not confined to those poorer regions. For instance, there have been cases in developed nations where individuals have been prosecuted, including for financial gain. But in terms of geographical location, there seems to be a set of conditions or a recipe, if you will, that makes certain regions more prone to the prevalence of CSA live streaming. So the key ingredients that contribute to this include poverty. So poverty may drive families to desperation, making them vulnerable to financial incentives offered by perpetrators. Also in areas where the internet is widely accessible, this form of exploitation is more easily carried out as offenders can connect with victims across borders, making detection and prosecution more challenging. In many regions, including Southeast Asia, cultural expectations, for example, children contributing to the family income might exacerbate the risk of exploitation. And finally, proficiency in English that can further compound the issue as it allows facilitators to reach a global audience. So these elements, when combined, create an environment where the exploitation of children through live streaming becomes even more likely. I want to now talk about the technological and legal barriers that can hinder the detection and prosecution of CSA live streaming. So of course, there's encryption and privacy concerns. So end-to-end encryption, privacy settings such as private mode, it can potentially hinder the ability to monitor and detect live streaming in real time, and it may obscure crucial evidence, making it difficult to trace and gather information about perpetrators and their activities. You've also got anonymity in payment systems, so anonymous payment methods like cryptocurrency complicates the identification of offenders and financial tracking. The anonymous nature of these systems may impede efforts to connect payments to criminal activities. There's also real-time surveillance challenges. So the challenge of regulating live stream content in real time, particularly on certain platforms, is exacerbated by the dynamic nature of this technology. Content moderation policies are also sometimes ineffective, and detecting live streaming of abuse as it happens can be very difficult. There's also limitations of detection tools. So existing detection methods are not foolproof, and in cases where secure and encrypted connections are used, law enforcement may face difficulties in gathering such evidence. And so we know that new technologies and platforms are constantly emerging. We know that, outpacing current detection tools. And as for the legal barriers, there are inadequate legal frameworks. So the lack of specific international legal provisions addressing CSA live streaming as a distinct crime creates gaps in enforcement and prosecution. So most laws do not criminalise live streaming itself, but focus on related offences like child prostitution or child sexual abuse material. Also, weak legislation in certain countries. In countries with weak child protection laws, the live streaming of CSA is more prevalent. This is often due to insufficient legal frameworks, lack of resources, or weak enforcement mechanisms. There's of course also jurisdictional issues. So cross-border collaboration can sometimes be problematic as differences in legal definitions, terms, enforcement standards make it difficult to coordinate investigations across jurisdictions. And so this fragmentation adds to delays and inefficiencies in responding to these crimes. And then there's of course legal loopholes and gaps. So many countries lack harmonised laws that adequately address CSA live streaming as a distinct criminal act, as I just mentioned, and perpetrators can exploit safe havens in jurisdictions with lenient or poorly enforced laws. So while some of these issues are specific to CSA live streaming, many, such as privacy concerns, anonymity, and weak legal frameworks, are broader challenges in online child exploitation. And in fact, throughout the current conference, some of these issues have been noticeable in other areas in the field. So what do we know about viewers and facilitators? So offenders are generally categorised in those two groups, viewers and facilitators. So viewers are those individuals that request the live streaming and specific sexual acts. And they're primarily, as I indicated before, from developed countries, so such as the United States, Sweden, Australia. And this indicates that viewers tend to come from wealthier countries, possibly due to better internet access, but also due to greater financial means. In terms of age, with an average age of 54 years and 2/3 falling between 50 and 69 years old, this is notably older than typical offenders of child sexual abuse material or contact abuse, suggesting that motivations behind CSA live streaming may differ based on age. Criminal history. Most viewers in the research have no criminal history, but those with sexual offence history tend to engage in multiple transactions and spend more money. And then I want to turn to escalation. So over time, CSA live streaming viewers tend to increase the frequency and cost of their transactions. In terms of facilitators, they're also known as operators, so they might organise the live streaming session, recruit children, and manage the abuse during the broadcast. So they set up the webcam and often instruct victims on how to perform for the viewers. In terms of family ties, what you might find alarming is that many facilitators are family members of the victims, with mothers being the most common. So this suggests that the abuse often occurs within the family unit where trust is exploited. And then as for age and gender, facilitators are usually young with a median age of 20 and predominantly female, as just indicated. So their age and gender may reflect social dynamics where younger females are more likely to take on caregiving roles. And so what's really interesting is that most of the existing research primarily focuses on the viewers. However, there is a noticeable gap when it comes to understanding the facilitators, those who enable, those who assist in the production and distribution of such content. So more research, for anyone who's interested, more research on facilitators is required to attain a greater understanding of how these networks operate and how best to intervene. But most importantly, what do we know about the victims? Research has found that 98% of these victims are children aged 13 and under, with 69% specifically between the age group of 11 to 13 years, highlighting that vulnerability, that real vulnerability for preteens and early adolescents. Research has also found that most live streaming victims, in fact 96% of a sample, were female and only 3% male, 1% involving both genders, highlighting that disproportionate targeting of females. So this gender imbalance may stem from societal views that sexualise females and market demand for female children in these illicit activities. As for the severity of the abuse, 40% of CSA live streaming material involves category A or B abuse. So category A involves acts such as bestiality, sadism, etc. 40%, both A and B. Harm. So in terms of live streaming exploitation, in addition to the dreadful sexual harm that takes place, there's also the profound emotional, psychological and physical harm to victims. So the emotional toll is of course compounded by the public nature of live streaming, where these victims are often aware that they are being watched by others, increasing feelings of exposure and violation. And in terms of the background of these victims, they may also face many other forms of abuse, neglect, financial hardship as well, which increases their vulnerability. Many victims have low levels of education, not even making it to grade 7 of schooling. Limited resources as well, making it harder for them to escape and seek help. So we've explored the challenges in terms of detection, in terms of legal issues. We've also explored facilitators, viewers, victims. Let's now turn to some considerations and recommendations. And so our paper didn't explore specific recommendations. However, I thought it was really important and practical for me to explore some recommendations and considerations that others in the field have highlighted. So I can talk about some of the critical actions needed. So here is a brief overview of some of them, otherwise we'd probably be here all day. So one key area that's been mentioned is collaboration across stakeholders, and I guess this has been a common theme throughout the conference I've noticed. So the need for collaboration between data owners, researchers, tech designers, child safety experts, etc. The list goes on. So by working together, these stakeholders can enhance global knowledge about live streaming, enabling us to better measure the prevalence, understand the impact, and assess the effectiveness of interventions. And then there's also global law enforcement coordination. So it's indicated that combating live streaming, it requires, of course, global cooperation. So while law enforcement must enhance, coordination globally, the level of willingness and capacity may not be on par across all countries. So further, we know that the onus does not fall solely on law enforcement. It requires action from the tech industry, payment systems, financial institutions, etc., to assist in disrupting and detecting these crimes. Which leads me to tech platforms, which of course play a crucial role and play a very central role in facilitating live streaming. So these tech platforms, if they're not already, need to ensure they are taking a proactive stance instead of detecting abuse in once it's already occurred. So those reactive measures. And reporting systems. So it's suggested to better address CSA live streaming, reporting mechanisms for suspected abuse on online platforms should be expanded and formalised on a global scale. So this would ensure that more suspected incidents are flagged, contributing to a greater global response. So they are some of the key considerations and recommendations, and one day, hopefully, all countries will have the same level of commitment in addressing CSA live streaming. And I must apologise, I've clearly got a bit too passionate throughout today's presentation. I've spoken a little bit too quickly, so I'm finishing a couple of minutes early. So thank you very much, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.